Welcome to the Northern Beaches Hospital Forum. This is we've pulled this off in just a couple of weeks, so thank you to our staff, my staff and Jackie's staff. You'll see them in their t-shirts, you can't miss them. One says Michael Regan, one says Jackie Scrooby. So if you need any help, don't ask them. They're exhausted. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's a big deal. We know how much of a big deal this is for our community. I'll start by acknowledging country, and can I pay my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge that we are on their lands, and we're gathered here and it has significance for many Aboriginal people. This is a complex history on the Northern Beaches here with Aboriginal people, and there remains to need for healing. So can I extend my warmest respects to all elders past and present and all First Nations peoples here tonight. Now, formalities, because that's what I'm kicking off with. Lucky me, lucky you. Can I acknowledge our attendees today? We have the Treasurer and the Health Minister. This is an extraordinary effort for them to be here tonight. This is how much it means to them, and they volunteered their time. We didn't have to drag them here. I know Jackie and I like to drag ministers where we can, but this was them volunteering, so it means a great deal to both of us that you are here. So thank you, ministers. Equally, can I thank the Shadow Minister for Health, Kelly Sloan, who's here, and the Member for Manly, James Griffin, is here. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and you'll hear from Kelly as well. We have our two recently re-elected federal MPs, Dr Sophie Scoms, Federal Member for Mackellar, who's also been a tireless advocate for this, as has Zali Stegel. So thank you both for your support and for being here tonight. Really, really importantly, we have the families who've had probably the worst experiences that at the hospital and have told their stories publicly, which is incredibly brave, incredibly powerful, and I want to thank them personally for being here. And it's a big deal. And can I thank the Massers family, the Atkinson family, the Pittman family, and the Gill family. So thank you very much for being here. We also have hospital staff, nurses, midwives, doctors, and many other hospital staff, so thank you for what you do and for being here. It's a very big deal. And of course we have the various individuals and community groups who have followed this issue for many years, including people like, we all know them, the Save Mona Vale Hospital Committee, so thank you for your undying, unwavering support and for being here. And we even have, yes, thank you. And we even have a former Labor Premier here, Barry Unsworth, who's now a very proud People's Republic of Pittwater resident. So welcome, Barry. And I said in my time as Mayor, I wish I had actually invented that term, People's Republic of Pittwater, but John Brogden claims that. Bless him. Tonight's tone, I want to be really, 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 really serious about this. I want everyone to be respectful. We're here to answer your questions. There's going to be questions from the floor, but we're here to answer your questions, and the Treasurer and the Minister for Health have both given up their time to give you as much information as they can in a very raw, transparent and honest way, because that's not what I've been getting in terms of from prior, when I was asking questions and getting all the answers back from the bureaucracy, being commercial in confidence. It's frustrating, yes, but we've worked out a path with government to get to this position, and I can't thank them enough for what they've done personally, but I want to make sure that we keep the tone and respect. It's about looking forward, and Jackie will probably touch on that herself. We also, but also the welfare. We have New South Wales Health have organised counselling support here just in case. The Minister will elaborate a bit more on that, but thank you for joining us. And everyone be conscious of time. We want to hear from you, but we also want to hear from our guests who are on the panel tonight. So the format for tonight will be really simple. Jackie's going to do some introductory remarks. Then we're going to hear from the Minister for Health, the Honourable Ryan Park, the Treasurer, the Honourable Daniel Mookie, Kelly Sloan, MP, Shadow Minister for Health, and then we're going to hear from Eloise Masser, who's a local community advocate, and probably doesn't need any more introduction given what she's been up to. I'm certainly just want to reiterate that this is a respectful conversation. We're showing off God's playground, the Northern Beaches, to these great humans who got stuck in traffic and know our perils and shame and why we need more buses and public transport. Daniel, I'm looking at you, the Treasurer. More money. But in 2023, I ran for election to be a Member of Parliament, and during that campaign I just heard these extraordinary stories about what was happening at the hospital, but not just from patients who'd had a bad experience, but from nurses, doctors, midwives, staff, and that didn't resonate well. And my first meeting as an MP was with the Minister, with Ryan. So, mate, what's happening? What's happening? I'm asking a series of questions. I'm raw. I don't know what I'm doing necessarily in terms of what questions they're necessarily asked, but I'm getting told all this. I get these responses back from New South Wales Health saying, oh, you know, it seems to be going okay, okay. So then I go back, respond back to constituents, and they'd say no. Respond back to staff, they say no, and it's just this pattern that kept happening. So together with the Minister, I asked some further questions of different MPs with the experience in this, how to deal with these situations, because you feel helpless as an MP. You want to fix things, you want to help, and you want to respond proactively. And we came up with a plan to do what they call an independent audit from the Auditor General. So the Auditor General is independent of the government and oversees all the departments. And so from that conversation with the then Margaret Crawford, an amazing lady, who encouraged me to put forward a request to do this and use some new provisions that the government had created, which was called Follow the Dollar provisions, that I think one of the Accounts Committee and the Speaker of the House, Greg Piper, had told me about. And so those conversations we presented with, and the new Auditor General said, we'd love to take this on and prioritise it and get this done. And from that, we are where we are today, and I just want to say thank you to the Auditor General, who was not here, but also to the Minister for encouraging me to keep following this, because I don't take no for an answer, not well anyway, and I am persistent. So I just want you to know that that's where it's all stemmed from, and I really have appreciated the support from the federal MPs who've got an interest in this as well. And my newest recruit MP, the great member for Pittwater, Jackie Scrooby, and she's going to speak to you now and do some introductory remarks. Jackie.
I'll fiddle with this while I say thank you, Michael. And look, hopefully tonight marks the re-engagement of the community around the discussion about Northern Beaches Hospital. And the situation has been moving incredibly quickly. And Michael and I have called this forum to give you a chance to be informed, but also to have your voice heard. From a first principles point of view, our continued focus will be on improving the healthcare services with regards to the hospital for people on the Northern Beaches, irrespective of ownership, whether that's another private operator or Healthscope or it's returned to public hands, that we have improved services and that we have increased operational funds if underfunding is an issue. I want to acknowledge that at the time of privatisation there was significant community opposition, and some people in the room tonight who were very active in that campaign. And as we stand here today before New South Wales Parliament is legislation to ban future public-private partnerships when it comes to the delivery of acute healthcare services, and that has, multi-partisan, bipartisan support. I think there's recognition that there are inherent conflicts which can lead to profits over patients, and particularly in regard to Northern Beaches Hospital. So the current state of play with the hospital at the moment is, as of Monday, as reported in the AFR, Healthscope has no longer got Brookfields in control, but rather their lenders, and they've got a $1.6 billion debt stack. Healthscope is seeking to sell its portfolio of 38 hospitals, either as a portfolio or individually. They have offered for the New South Wales Government to buy back the public elements of Northern Beaches Hospital, which is why a task force has been established, to which the Minister for Health and Treasurer will speak to tonight. There's been the recent audit report that Michael mentioned, and that found that Healthscope is not delivering the requirements of the deed, and is not effectively delivering integrated, high-quality care in accordance with that deed. Also found that the partnership is at risk of failure, there is a risk to the viability of the hospital going forward, and a number of other findings and recommendations, which, if you are interested, I encourage people to download and have a look at that audit report. It has said that there are significant issues, and it goes into a lot of the details about those issues and what need to be rectified, but also somewhat contradictory in nature. It does find that on some metrics the hospital is outperforming other public hospitals as well, which is something that I hope the Minister for Health can talk to tonight. There have been 9 legal battles. The New South Wales Government has given $140 million worth of value, additional value to Healthscope. And we know that there are, because of tragedies, but also the audit report and the previous parliamentary inquiries, numerous issues that need to be addressed and that haven't been addressed. So undoubtedly there's a lot here tonight that many people will say should have been done earlier, should never have happened, and responsibility with Healthscope, the previous government, but also the New South Wales Health and current government as well. But tonight, it's all future focused. We want to have your voice heard, and we'll be asking questions from the audience as well as questions that we've received through the registration process. There are lots of questions. We won't get to all of them, but that's why there is a QR code on your seats, and that QR code links to the New South Wales Parliamentary Inquiry. Whether you've had an experience at the hospital or you have an opinion, please write a submission. It can be a couple of paragraphs long. It's subject to parliamentary privilege. You can make that confidential if you wish to, but you have until next week, the 20th of May, to make that submission. There is a plea, obviously, from our community that we, tonight and going forward, look beyond politics, recognise the need for a fully functioning hospital, irrespective of its ownership. And I think tonight having representation from across the political spectrum is a turning point in that regard. So thank you, and I'll leave it to Michael to introduce other speakers tonight.
Well done, Jackson. Very briefly again, the format will be hear from our first few speakers. We'll then invite them to stay on stage and we'll ask the questions that you've asked through registration, and then we'll throw it directly to the audience after that. So could I now invite, please, the Honourable Ryan Park, Minister for Health, up to the stage.
Thank you, Michael, and Jackie, thank you very much for having us here. To all my parliamentary colleagues who have already been introduced, thank you very, very much. I do want to say from the outset a couple of things, briefly, because we're here to listen, but briefly a couple of things. Importantly, we do have support in the room. This is an emotional issue, and having had the opportunity to listen to people who have had some bad experiences at the hospital, I know how traumatic that can be. So there are people at the back from New South Wales Health. If you need a break, please make yourself available to those staff. This is a very difficult and challenging issue. It is complex in nature, but it is simple in a lot of other areas as well. This model of healthcare no longer works. This is not a model of healthcare that works anymore from my perspective in this country, but certainly from my perspective in this state. This is a model that unfortunately does not deliver the benefits to the community in the way that our public health system does. And we can look at it through a complex lens of contracts, or you can just simply look at it through what drives organisations. And when private firms are involved, there is obviously going to be a focus on the bottom line. It's not to say that New South Wales Health don't have financial responsibilities, of course we do. But what we put first is clinical care and people first. And what I can give you an assurance going forward is that we will work with your community, the Treasurer and I. We will work with your local representatives, particularly at a state level, but obviously at a federal level, and with you as individuals to try and do whatever we can to make sure that this facility comes back into public hands. Now that is a very complex component, but the Treasurer and I, multiple times now every week, led by our agencies, and many of those agencies, including New South Wales and Health Treasury, are here tonight, and I want to thank them for their work, are working on this literally now at a daily rate. This is something that we are trying to do in record time. But I say to everybody, it is not easy. But that does not mean we can't get there. I believe, the Treasurer believes, and I hope everyone in this room believes we can get there. but I've also got to make sure you have an understanding of the challenges ahead. So I want to thank everyone for their contribution. I want to particularly thank the Massa family, and Leah, the mother of baby Harper, who I had an opportunity to meet with last week. These families have gone through grief that, unless you've experienced that, none of us could ever imagine. But I can tell you, I hope your community is incredibly proud of them, because in the face of that unfathomable grief, they have decided to be incredible advocates, not just for this community, but New South Wales. And I think that stands them in enormous stead in terms of the individuals they are, the families they are, and on behalf of the New South Wales Government, on behalf of the Treasurer and I and the Premier, can I thank those families for being willing to share their story, as painful as it is, but more importantly from being willing to share and to make a determination that out of such grief can become such hope. And I thank them very much on behalf of all of you. I do want to acknowledge that the Northern Beaches Hospital, when it was made a decision to privatise, was opposed by many people, perhaps many people in the room here tonight. I know within my own political party, the members of the Labor Party in this part of the world were staunch advocates to stop that decision from happening. I know that and I recognise that. I also know that this was a decision of a former government, but is it a decision that will impact our government and any future government going forward. So the Treasurer and I have made a decision that we will try and right a wrong. We will try a right and wrong. But we're also made a decision to introduce a piece of legislation into Parliament that would make such a decision from happening again very, very difficult for any future government going forward. And I think that is important for all of you to understand and to recognise that we as legislators, from a government perspective, recognise that this was a bad decision. It has had detrimental outcomes, and we have made a decision to try and fix it, and at the same time try and ensure that future governments, regardless of who they are, don't go down this pathway again. Thank you for having us here tonight.
Thank you, Minister Park. And now I invite the Treasurer, Mr. Daniel Mookhey. Where are you hiding? Down the front there, sir. Come on up and we'll hear from you. Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you, Michael. And can I begin by acknowledging that we are on Indigenous land, and I too want to pay respects to Elders past, present and emerging, and all Indigenous people who are present here, and pledge my solidarity and the New South Wales Government's ongoing solidarity with all First Nations people as we strive to perfect this democracy by ensuring that its opportunities are available to all its citizens. Can I also take this opportunity to acknowledge you, Michael, and you, Jackie, and thank you very much for organising the forum, and to your respective staff as well. As Michael made reference, we asked for this, actually, because Ryan and I, when we were having to deal with the complex set of circumstances, said we are accountable to your communities like we are accountable to the Parliament, and therefore we should come, we should front, we should answer questions. And so I'm really pleased that so many people of the community have come out tonight to do that. And it's an important thing right now, not just in general, because we are making big decisions that are going to affect this community. Yes, we're making them under complex commercial considerations and, in, dare I say, crisis conditions. But that doesn't mean that we, the community, should lose their voice, because a lot of the decisions we will make will impact on this community for many years to come. And I think it's right and it's fair, and it's something that Ryan and I take very seriously, as does the Premier, as does the government, that the communities that are being affected by these decisions should have the opportunity to speak directly to decision makers. So I'm really pleased so many people have come out tonight. Can I acknowledge the federal members, of course? Can I acknowledge the state members and the opposition who have a tough job? I know we did it for a long time. And can I also just take one opportunity to acknowledge one person who wasn't acknowledged, which was Greg Donnelly, the Honourable Greg Donnelly from the MLC, who's here. And I acknowledge Greg because he chaired the 2019 inquiry in the Upper House about the Northern Beaches Hospital. And I know that, as Ryan's already acknowledged, a long-standing activist in this community as well. Former Premier as well. I also want to acknowledge the workforce and their unions that are here tonight as well. And I very much acknowledge the work that they've been doing representing their workforce since this contract was signed and beyond. So I just acknowledge that as well. Taking one step back, we're here to provide as much information as we can. I'm looking forward to the questions. I did want to take one step back and just provide people with some of the basic facts about the way in which this contract works. And because, as Jackie said, this is a fast, dynamic and changing environment. This is a contract that was signed in 2014. It's a contract that technically runs to 2058. It is a contract that was the first of what was the previous government intended to be 5 hospitals that would be built under this model across New South Wales. And the Northern Beaches Hospital was the first to test whether the model would indeed work before it would expand. And it's fair to say that it did not expand to any of the other 4 areas for which it was intended to apply. The contract operates on an unusual scenario. That is that it's been designed deliberately so it's indistinguishable which part is the private, which part is the public. And that was designed because the theory at the time, and I can't speak for it because it was technically 5 treasurers ago, the theory at the time was that a private equity operator could offer the state a discount in exchange for being able to, in essence, divert patients into a private system for which health insurers would pay, not taxpayers. And that theory was meant to sustain the model. And in order to have the right to be able to access that, for want of a better term, diversion to the private system, Healthscope agreed to charge a discount. That contract has been renegotiated a few times, actually, which is made clear in the Auditor General report. And that is because, obviously, as it turns out, running an acute emergency hospital is more complex than it looks. And there's a reason why New South Wales Health, our healthcare workers, have been doing it for more than a century. Which I guess is a long way of saying private equity shouldn't be running acute emergency care. And so that is the short story. The longer story is that in order to exit, we obviously are obliged to follow the contract that we inherited. And that itself has a lot of complexity to it. There's a complexity around the fact that the contract wasn't written so it could easily be broken. It contains within it clauses that require the state to, in essence, if it decides to terminate it, to pay what was the expected profits at the time the contract was signed. That means today, in 2025, we have to, under the contract, assess, go back to 2014, determine what was meant to be the expected profits from 2014 to 2024, back pay that, and then pay the residual expected profits from 2024 to 2038 if it's the public, or 2058 if it's the private. Now, that is, if that strikes you as unusual, that strikes me as unusual. I won't speak to that, but I would simply say When I have said publicly, as the Health Minister has said publicly, that we're eager to ensure that the hospital returns to public hands, we're also mindful of the fact that we don't think private equity deserves a windfall gain. And we don't think that we should be handing over taxpayers' money to a private equity firm that is trying to sell the business right now. And that is the reasons why, before we get anywhere near the complexity to do with the future operating model, which has to be determined by contract, that is sort of a big issue that we are working through. So as we talk about this going tonight and beyond, we will happily go into as much detail as we can about how that works. We will happily take a lot of questions we can about how that works, and we will provide what information we can. But I just want to return to what the Minister said. Our first principle here is to ensure that whether you live in the Northern Beaches or you live in the north of New South Wales, you get access to a public emergency department. And we do not think for a moment that this model ever was going to work, frankly, but we don't think that any part of our citizens in any part of our state deserves less quality healthcare than any other citizen. And so that's our guiding principle. And I have to stress, for me personally, the reminder, I spend a lot of time in looking at spreadsheets, spend a lot of time looking at economic models, I spend a lot of time looking at tax forecasts and wonderful things like bond market speculation. But when it comes to reality, what reminds me about why this all matters is frankly the advocacy of the Massar family and other families. When they actually speak about what this means for us to get this right, what often looks like a calculation on a spreadsheet often affects a person's life. And when it comes to healthcare, both the Minister and I take that responsibility very seriously, and it's why we say that when it comes to these particularly tough questions, yes, the road is hard, yes, it's incredibly complex, but the actual destination is pretty simple and the motivation behind it is pretty strong. It's really to make sure that no one has to go through what these families have gone through. So I close by just paying respect to them, and I haven't had the opportunity to meet some of the other affected families, but that stays with me, and it's not going to stop until we get this done. Thank you very much for having us here tonight. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to talk.
I'm guessing, Eloise, I'm going to have to pull this down a bit for you. But not for our next speaker. So could I, class of 2023 is myself and our next speaker, the Shadow Minister for Health, Kelly Sloan. And again, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael and Jackie, and also acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues here at state and federal level, including, he's not speaking tonight, but James Griffin, my good friend, the member for Manly, and also Matt Cross, who is the member for Davidson. He can't be here tonight. He has a brand new little baby, so he's on paternity leave, but he did send his best as well. I also want to begin by acknowledging the strength and the spirit of this community, and I see it on display tonight with such a strong turnout. For many here tonight, I know it is not easy for you to be here. I know some of you are still grieving. I know many of you are here because you want answers, you deserve answers, and you want better outcomes for your loved ones and for your neighbours. I wasn't originally scheduled to speak tonight, but I rang up Michael and I said, would you mind if I came along, because I think it's really important that you have everyone represented here. I wanted to be here to listen to your stories. I appreciate some of you may look at me and see the former government, the people that built this hospital. That's okay. I think it's important that I'm here and I'm working with you as part of the solution. Because regardless of our political differences here on stage, I think we all share that commitment to high quality health in this region and in every region in New South Wales. And I believe the only way to achieve that is by listening to your stories, your experiences, and collectively working on solutions. So at the outset, I also want to acknowledge the Massar family, to Eloise and to Danny, and to the other families who have suffered losses in recent times and who've been let down by the Northern Beaches Hospital. They've been driven to get answers about why Joe died, and they deserve those answers, but also to fight for solutions for this community. I can't begin to imagine the pain that they have been through, but like the others who've spoken tonight, I have tremendous admiration for you. And, you know, Eloise and Danny, I know when I sat in that room with you, one of the things I said to you was I will not make excuses for decisions of the past. I won't defend that. I will commit to you that I will be here to find solutions, and that is what I will do, and that is what the opposition will do. And the opposition has supported the parliamentary inquiry into the Northern Beaches Hospital, a coronial inquest, independent review of the emergency department, and the creation of Joe's Rule, which is an expansion of the REACH protocol to help families ensure that their voices are heard in emergency departments, not just here but around the state. We have also supported Joe's Law, which will prevent a future Northern Beaches Hospital type arrangement. And the truth is that Healthscope has fallen short of the trust that was placed in it by this community and by the former government. And we know what the Auditor General's report said. I won't repeat that, but it was confronting and it was clear, and there were multiple failures. It did not meet all of the performance expectations set out in the contract deed, a complicated deed, as you've just heard from the Treasurer. While on some metrics, you can be proud of your local hospital, and you should certainly be proud of the nurses and doctors and midwives that work there and all of the other clinical staff and admin staff. They do a tremendous job. But people, yeah. But people have been let down by Healthscope and by the private equity ownership. I share the view of the Health Minister and the Treasurer that Healthscope should not be receiving a windfall gain for failing to deliver on the contract that they signed. They must be held to a higher standard, whatever the result is. And again, my commitment is to work constructively with the government wherever I can, and that was my commitment to the masses. It is my commitment to you tonight. I know that under a former government, 11 years ago, well before I signed up 2 years ago, that commitment was made to build what they had hoped would be a world-class facility and what still can be a world-class facility for your community. It was floated originally by a Labor Premier, Maurice Yemmer, who's a friend of mine. It was built by my former government, and we will work together to build to make it better for you. I want to say what I've said to Eloise and Danny and what I've said in the Parliament, that I am truly sorry. On behalf of the opposition, I am so sorry that you are here tonight and that the hospital has failed you and that ultimately we failed you. To people like the Pittmans and Atkinsons and to the Gill family and to others and to all of you that are here, I commit to work with everyone here tonight. We will be constructive, and we will hopefully create a better future for you and your community. So thank you.
And thank you, Kelly. And as I introduce Eloise to come up and say a few words, I just want to say that I move with the support of both the opposition and the government a bill to Parliament to do exactly what our speakers have said, and that's to do our best endeavours to prevent any compensation being paid to Healthscope for this being returned back into public hands. So that at the moment has the support of both government and opposition as they work through the finer details of it, but that's because of talking to people like the Massa family and Atkinson family and hearing their stories, and it's really important that we don't reward Healthscope. So fingers crossed. Eloise.
Thank you, Michael. That's okay. Put one of Joe's shoes there. I could never have imagined in my wildest dreams that losing Joe, someone who we love beyond words, 2 months before he was about to turn 2, would give me so much courage. But here we are. I have a fire in my belly that I will not allow to be extinguished. It is with this fierce determination that Danny and I decided that we would speak up to do what is right, just and good, not only for Joe, but for every single person in our community and beyond. And when I wake up every morning, I make a conscious decision to choose hope and love over utter despair and heartbreak. And I will not stop choosing hope. Change is happening, and change is happening at a rapid pace thanks to a very supportive government. I look forward to a tomorrow full of hope, where I can genuinely say, I believe every single person on the Northern Beaches community will be safe attending their local hospital on their toughest days, and I look forward to that day. Our wisdom as individuals and as a community and as a government comes from not only what we learn, but what we unlearn. And what we know is that the structure and the systems at Northern Beaches Hospital does not work, and it has failed catastrophically. Joe's case is not a one-off, it isn't isolated, and there is systemic change that needs to occur. Thank you so much to everyone in our community and beyond for listening to our pleas on the Ben Fordham Show in February. We asked everyone to stand with us on this journey of seeking justice and reform, and without all of your support, we simply wouldn't be here. It wouldn't have worked. So thank you so much to our community. I want to acknowledge and express a very deep sense of gratitude to our government, Premier Chris Minns, Health Minister Ryan Park, our Treasurer Daniel Mookie, Susan Pearce, and of course our local MPs Jackie Scrooby and Michael Regan, because they are passionately working towards change. And importantly, Opposition Health Kelly Sloan, thank you so much. I know personally she's committed to making change and working with the government on this. Danny and I will forever be grateful to the collaboration of the government. So thank you, and I genuinely want you to know that. I often find inspiration in this quote on some of the days I find tough to get out of bed, and I wanted to share it with you tonight. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not driven to fear. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed. We will get back up as a community, and we will rise strong. Because Joe, stay with us, be with us, and transform us. Guide the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Eloise, Danny, thank you so much for coming up and sharing all that with us. Could I just ask for one more round of applause to say thank you very sincerely. So that sets the scene. Now, first question from those of you in the audience who pre-submitted some questions, thank you again for that. And that sets it nicely. So my first question is to the Treasurer. Given Healthscope's repeated offers to return the public portion of Northern Beaches Hospital, as revealed by the New South Wales Auditor General's report, why were previous offers to hand back not taken up by the government?
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. I'm glad you asked it up front. And I guess the colloquial way of answering it is because they weren't real. And I'll take one step back. Into 2023, they did approach New South Wales Health and did say, why don't you activate the termination clause, which in essence pay us to leave. And that would have triggered the profit principle, which of course New South Wales Health at that time concluded that that wasn't in a sensible proposal and it wasn't a serious proposal. Now, that's the short story. The longer story is this, is that just prior, in February 2023, in fact, from what I can tell, just before the government went into what's called caretaker, which is when a government's going to an election, it can't make major decisions. The government at the time renegotiated the contract and restruck a new one, or varied it effectively. And it says what happened at the end of 2023 was that there was an attempt to revisit what wasn't achieved in that February renegotiation. I can't speak for that February renegotiation because we weren't in government. And we also respect the fact that there are principles that are important, which is one government can't release information that belonged to the previous. So we can't answer what happened in February 2023. We don't know. And we can't answer that question. We can only deal with the circumstances in which we dealt with. But I just return to what I said before, which is observing what was happening with Healthscope in 2023, a distressed business that put a $1.6 billion debt pile on it, that was having to repay its debt, was finding itself in a position where by fulfilling its contract obligations, it was losing money, which is still the case today. They sought to exit with effectively the state paying them to leave. And that was an assessment made by New South Wales Health, but that's why it never really seriously progressed. And then when that wasn't accepted, what's been characterised in the Auditor General's report as the second attempt wasn't an attempt to exit, it was an attempt to renegotiate the contract again. And effectively, for want of a better term, asked the state to say that we no longer want to fulfil the obligations we signed up to. We would prefer to be paid like a private hospital for public health, which is a similar arrangement that they have with their private insurers. Now, that was an assessment made by New South Wales Health that wasn't a serious proposal. And I should say, there's obviously been a change in corporate leadership amongst Healthscope, so there's a different CEO now. But I'll be honest, that is still their position. That is still their position. So we formed a task force. We've got the two leaders here. We're negotiating. That is still their position. Their position isn't to graciously exit. It's not to, oh, well, here we want to get out. It's their position as it currently stands is, you want us to leave, so pay us to go.
Wow. Jackie.
I'm not sure. It is on. So there's a quick question here. This won't take long. The public-private partnership legislation, which spans future PPPs, why can't it apply to this hospital and sort of act to end the public-private partnership?
Well, we're not ruling that out.
Yeah, okay.
We have to work through various complexities to do that, but we certainly haven't said that we're ruling that out. And I understand that Michael's moved a bill.
Yeah, that's the no compensation bill, and that's the one that we're trying to make sure that we give them not a brass razoo, not a Zach. And that's the, but to your point, they say in the public, they say in the media, we don't want to get a windfall gain from this, but then they go to the negotiating table and say otherwise. They want it to the terms of the deed, which they renegotiated.
Yeah, I think it's important also to go a step back slightly to this, just to understand a little bit of context about why the bill is so important that's in the Parliament at the moment, is because the former government, not only with Northern Beaches, but there were talk and plans to roll this type of model out to 5 other hospitals. Now, that would have been disastrous. Over a period of time, a decision was changed by the former government under Minister Hazzard to not do that. But we made the decision, Jackie, to put that bill into place to try and future-proof that type of decision-making again, so that we're not having these types of meetings in 10 or 15 or 20 years' time when Daniel and I are off doing other things and someone else is in our roles. We didn't want these types of discussions to be having, which is why we took a pretty extraordinary step to introduce a piece of legislation which Michael, as he's just outlined, has added to in terms of another bill that we're currently looking at.
And I guess this is a common question that's asked by many in the audience, and that's basically, you've touched on it, but categorically at this point, only the public part of the hospital has been touted for a hand back by Healthscope. Is that correct? Well, I guess will the government
Yes.
consider a full buyback of the hospital, return it entirely into public hands?
Well, I just stress, I can't speak for Healthscope, and it's not my job to speak for Healthscope as well. But it's fair to say that they aren't seeking to exit the private arrangement. And incidentally, I will observe that there are other hospitals in New South Wales that have private hospitals that are co-located with them. In fact, my two children were born in a hospital that was co-located with a private hospital. It's common. It's not that unusual. What is unusual about this one is that they are co-joined, and they are virtually indistinguishable from the perspective of a person who's coming in. That's a complexity, but they have no desire to exit the private component, to the best of my knowledge.
I suppose just further to that one, if they're saying the whole portfolio of companies or of hospitals is for sale, then arguably that private element could be for sale.
The way I use is that in a sale of the entire Healthscope group, anyone who buys the entire Healthscope group will accept the obligations to run the Northern Beaches Hospital as it is.
Yeah.
It's not like anyone is being offered the opportunity to distinguish from the Northern Beaches, private from public, in determining whether they want to own the 38 hospitals. I should just stress as well that it's not a given that the entire company is sold. It's entirely possible that a whole bunch of things could happen. The entire company could go into administration, it could go into receivership, it could go into, or each hospital could be sold separately. It doesn't necessarily follow that the same group will operate the 38 hospitals the same way. But it's fair to observe that there is no particular desire amongst others to operate the Northern Beaches Hospital as is, for the very simple reason that it's a failed model.
The next question is that the New South Wales Auditor General exposed alarming issues, and also obviously the recent tragedies as well, within the emergency department, whether that's the risk management systems, the electronic systems, whether it's cost cutting, and also emergency department wait times. How can the government address this, whether it is brought back and comes to public hands, or it remains under the current arrangements?
I've got Anthony Shrembry here tonight. Anthony, do you want to just stand up just for a moment, just so people know where he is in case people want to have a discussion afterwards? Anthony runs the Northern Sydney Local Health District. He and his team, for some time now, it's probably a better term than this, but have been micromanaging the Northern Beaches Hospital and their performance. I do want to acknowledge a couple of things though. We have no doubt staff from that hospital here with us tonight. I've had an opportunity in other forums to meet with some of those staff and their union representatives. I acknowledge that those staff are going through a pretty tough time at the moment, and I think it's important for we as a group to acknowledge that and to remember that. They are, without a doubt, doing their very best to perform their profession and carry out the profession under difficult circumstances. But we have got now a number of reviews into Northern Beaches Hospital. The Clinical Excellence Commission is leading a review into the emergency department with a particular focus on paediatric care. Anthony Shrembry and his team from Northern Sydney Local Health District are looking at all of the recommendations that came out of the SAEA, which is a serious adverse event review, which came as a result of baby Joe's passing. Those things are reported to me on a fortnightly basis, and we are in constant discussion around the performance of Northern Beaches Hospital. People may or may not be surprised, but the Independent Bureau of Health Information, who provides a sort of a snapshot of health and hospital performance every 3 months, have certainly not raised, in terms of the data, any serious performance issues in relation to things such as elective surgery wait times and ED wait times. That doesn't mean, just want to be clear on this, that doesn't mean at all that there are not issues. It's just how they compare to hospitals of similar size. Now, putting all that aside, what we are doing through Anthony and his team, and have been now for some time, is very, very carefully managing the clinical performance of the hospital. The task force, led by Alpha D'Amato and a team representatives from Sonia from New South Wales Treasury, and with staff, and with Matthew Daly, the Deputy Secretary in New South Wales Health, are not only working through the contract, but are also importantly, from residents' perspective, working out what the model would look like and how we would untangle a very tangled web in that hospital. That is not easy, but the priority that the Treasurer and I have set the task force is safety first, patient safety first, second and third. And that's what will guide us over the next few days, weeks and months in our negotiations, and it will also guide us in terms of the operating model that we set up going forward for that hospital.
So that's a good segue, Minister, into one of the questions I dare say one of the staff has asked us here, is can the New South Wales Government enforce nurse-to-patient ratios at Northern Beaches Hospital, similar to what's being proposed at the public hospitals elsewhere?
Well, if we take over that emergency department and the public component, yes we can and yes we will. I've been very clear that nurse-to-patient ratios is a commitment from the government that is particularly important to me. The Treasurer and I made a commitment in opposition to embark on the largest reform in the way our public hospitals are staffed. We are now in the process of well and truly rolling out that to level 5 and 6 emergency departments that, from my understanding, would probably be a category of Northern Beaches, and the vast majority of those now are moving into a 1-to-3 in ED ratio.
Excellent. So, sorry?
Yeah, about the contract.
The
contract does make, we can't apply it. Yes, the answer, I think the question that was put is can you apply
Can you enforce it? Can you
under
enforce
the
it?
contract?
Under the
contract,
current
you can't.
contract, sorry, or if we were to take it over?
Under the current
Under the-
contract. I think it's under the current
Okay,
contract. which answers
sorry.
no.
No, the nurse-to-patient ratios, so similar to what was proposed for public hospitals elsewhere. I think you
Yeah,
answered
no.
the question. Yeah.
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 So, Jackie,
I think, given the
We've
time,
got-
we should go to the floor. These questions are from people who have written in, but I think we should go to the floor.
okay,
because
I
it's
think you
after
should
that.
just ask the one more about the what systems are in place to ensure patient complaints and safety reports about Northern Beaches Hospital are meaningfully addressed as a result of these changes.
Yeah, well, at the moment, obviously people are communicating complaints directly with Northern Beaches, the management there. Obviously we are...
Okay, we'll get to the floor in a minute.
Obviously, through Anthony Shrembury and the team at New South Wales Health are monitoring those patient or carer complaints. People can also make a complaint through the Healthcare Complaints Commission. That is an independent jurisdiction, independent of government, that has been in place for some time now. Obviously, if we were to take over that component, that public component, then that would be through the normal complaint system through the local health district or hospital level first, then through the local health district, and then through the New South Wales Ministry of Health.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to take questions from floor, starting with some of the hospital and health staff. And I'm just going to throw it in.
I have a question for the Minister, but before I start, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Keith Burgess. I'm Chairman of the Medical Staff Council at Northern Beaches Hospital, so represent the senior doctors, and I speak on their behalf. I would like to say I have no conflicts of interest, and that a lot of the criticisms of Northern Beaches Hospital clinical practice were submitted to the auditor's report from the Medical Staff Council. Having said that, we have a good hospital, despite what you might read lately. It's a very good hospital. It could be a great hospital. The fundamental problem has been underfunding from the get-go, and there are a lot of organisations that have dirt on their hands related to that from the ministry down. I haven't got time to go into that, but I will say that we are agnostic about who runs the hospital. I know a lot of people in the room here have already made up their mind. We don't care whether it's the state taking over the public beds or whether Healthscope gets extra funding and the contract's rewritten. What is clear to us is the hospital's been underfunded for 8 years and it needs an input of funding. So my question to the Minister is, on behalf of the Medical Staff Council, will the Minister guarantee that if the state takes over the public beds at Northern Beaches, that there will be an increase in funding and that there will not be a reduction in services? The reason for asking that is that most of us have worked in the public system for decades, and we know that the money never leaves St Leonard's, and so we have no faith in the LHD increasing funding. I suspect that if they take over the public beds, there'll actually be a reduction of services. Thank you.
Happy to answer that. Obviously, we're not in a position yet where we are taking it over, but I can assure you we're not in the game of reducing services at Northern Beaches Hospital. So that's the first thing that I want to be made very clear. Secondly, there have been, and Alpha is the CFO, who's the CFO of New South Wales Health, who's sitting next to you. There has been a number of payments made on top of the contract to Healthscope from New South Wales Health. And I want to be clear about that. I want to be very clear about that. Healthscope, rightly or wrongly, it's a matter for them to explain or otherwise, took out a contract and agreed to a contract with the former government based on the figures that they agreed to at the time. That's clearly not right. That's clearly has caused trouble for them. What we will do is try and unpack that. What we will do is make sure we have a look at the services we're providing there and make sure that it is a properly funded hospital. Obviously, we're not at a stage yet where we've got the operating model because we're working through the contract with the current operator. But I can assure you, I'm happy to meet with the Medical Staff Council. I'm happy to meet with representatives, as I already have done, of staff there. It'll be something that we will be working through as both the New South Wales Health and the New South Wales Government if we were to have in a position to take it back over again.
Hi, my name's Sheridan Brady. I'm the President of the Northern Beaches Hospital branch of the New South Wales Nurses and Midwives Association. I represent 800 nurses and midwives who are union members and work at the hospital. I'm an intensive care nurse and I love what I do for work. Healthscope's board is now in control of a still unclear group of lenders, including overseas distressed debt lenders, and its debt is being traded on the open market. Nurses and midwives are deeply concerned about the volatility of Healthscope's financial situation, and insolvency is still a very real prospect, and the timing of this happening will be out of the hands of the government. Should this happen, will this trigger the project deed, and would this mean that the state government would be left not only operating the public parts of Northern Beaches, but also left dealing with the private portion of Northern Beaches? There are departments that are vital to all patients that belong to the private sector, such as the cath lab, theatres and interventional radiology. Should these fail, where does that leave our public patients? What contingency plans does the New South Wales government have making to prepare for all of these possible scenarios to ensure that the wages and entitlements of the staff at Northern Beaches, and of course to ensure ongoing health services are maintained if Healthscope is no longer in a position to do so?
Yep, thank you. They're great questions. Well, so firstly, I should say that your question is absolutely right on multiple levels. Every one of the questions you've asked there are questions that we've put to the task force because we need to know the answers to. Secondly, Healthscope's finances are precarious. You are absolutely right in your read of the market dynamics. You're right that there are 27 banks that are part of this lending group. The Australian banks, what people would describe as the Big Four, own somewhere, we think, maybe 14% of the debt. You're right to say the debt is being sold on the secondary market. That is a process that effectively was allowed from Monday. We're obviously monitoring all that. It does mean that who owns the debt today is different to who owns the debt tomorrow. You are absolutely right that the world's what is regarded as a distressed debt buyers, otherwise known as hedge funds, who specialise in buying distressed debt. The world's biggest distressed debt buyers are buying Healthscope's debt. We're obviously monitoring all that. You're equally right that there's a very good chance that Healthscope could go into an insolvency that could trigger an administration event as well, and that will trigger a response as well. But I'm not going to lie to you, we can't predict all that. What we have to do is prepare for each of those scenarios, and we are. The first thing and to be fair to New South Wales Health, Healthscope's financial distress has been known. Health has been preparing for the contingency about what happens on day one should we find ourselves in a position in which the company can no longer fulfil the contract for an insolvency event. That contingency planning is in place. It's hard. It's very hard. And I'm not going to pretend to understand the full operational complexity of what that looks like. But I can absolutely let you know that that is being prepared, it's being updated, but it's going to have to continue to be changed depending on what develops. The second part of your question, which is excellent, what happens to the workers' entitlements? That is a question that fundamentally we are preparing for, but the lead responders there is going to be the federal government because it's similar to other companies that find themselves in insolvent positions. And I should just stress, that will affect obviously you and your 800 members. It will affect everyone who works for Healthscope in the 38 hospitals. And so obviously it will be a rather large insolvency event for which federal laws and federal insurance and protection schemes are engaged. The best example I can give is that there is a federal guarantee scheme that is activated now for people who are working for Rex Airlines and others as well. It's not a great position to be in, I'll be honest, right? But we're monitoring that. We're obviously talking pretty heavily about what that means. I should also just stress that we are, I don't want to be leaving people with a sense that there's an inherent risk of vulnerability there. There is security around assets for employees. And what we're working on is ensuring that, obviously with the federal government, that there is a plan in place for that. The final point you're asking, I think, in the series of questions that you asked, was ultimately around the preparedness of the government to intervene perhaps in that scenario. Yeah, we are asking Health and the task force to prepare for every conceivable scenario that we can. But I can't pretend that we have enough certainty to get ready for every eventuality. But we absolutely, that's why the Minister was making the point, we're getting briefed basically every day. We continue to be briefed pretty regularly, and we are paying close attention because it's a fast evolving situation.
Michael?
I was going to say, Ryan, did you want to ask say anything further on that or not?
Just very quickly, I've been focusing around those operational plans. I can assure you that Anthony and the team right across Northern Sydney Local Health District have got it down to what we would do on day 1, day 2, day 7, day 30. We are in there and have been in there for a while now because of the very public nature of the claims around Healthscope and their financial wall-to-wall for some time. So that doesn't necessarily resolve your issue tonight, only to say that your issue is being well thought through both from a Treasury perspective, but also importantly from an operational perspective in terms of what would we do on that day one, and how would we engage and bring in the staff that we need.
Thank you, Minister. Now, Susie, and then we've got...
Sue Martin, Secretary of the Save Mona Vale Hospital Committee, and I'm so delighted to see so many of you whom I recognise from our valiant fight to keep Mona Vale Hospital. We failed to persuade them, but here we are now. One minor point, people are talking about returning or giving back. It's a case of taking over. The government never had it, did it? So it's not a case of returning, it's a case of taking over. My point is that private patients are also adversely affected by the management practice and clinical care up at Northern Beaches Hospital. So why should Healthscope say they just want to give to us the public section? Thank you.
Who wants to take that?
Well, I don't think they should. I'm certainly not going to be a spokesperson for Healthscope here. But no, I don't think it is. What they're trying to do, and what they tried to do probably 18 months ago, to be honest, is hand over to taxpayers the most complex and difficult part, and for them to take the cream. That has been an issue, which is why we opposed this type of model of healthcare from the very beginning. I know members in this community opposed it. I know Mr Donnelly, who was recognised earlier, led an inquiry into it. So I don't really know what their claim to that would be, other than to say that they would take the cream, which is the private hospital and the throughput through that hospital, and then we would be dealing, the public and the taxpayer would be dealing with the more complex component and the more highly interventionist component, which is the public component.
Minister and/or Treasurer, off the back of that point that you made, and one of the questions I think you asked of us on an email recently was, do we know how much the previous government invested in this Northern Beaches Hospital in terms of capital, operational, and did Healthscope or their previous owners invest more? Do we have any idea of what numbers are public, what's not public?
Yeah, I mean, look, we can. I mean, look, I can't speak for the previous government either. Every now and then I want to, but I can't. I should say there's the land. The land was given as part of the contract as well. And at the end of the contract, it returns as well. That was a substantial state contribution to the arrangement. The second aspect is the state did contribute to some of the building and the machines that are inside it as well, but so did Healthscope. And that's why it's a bit more difficult to unravel as well, because Healthscope did contribute to the construction of the hospital, and they did contribute to the purchasing of equipment as well. And so that is one of the issues that we do need to work through in the event that we are taking it over, and as well. It's not as simple as they built all of it or they built none of it. It is kind of a blended funding model, but the substantial state contribution was, of course, the land and the buildings as well. And that is, the grey zone is, I think, as the President of the Nurses Federation branch made reference, is that there's shared facilities. And it's the fact that the shared facilities are there, like the theatres, parts of the cafes and elsewhere, in which the question of who paid for what becomes very complex. And that all, under the contract, has to be worked through, frankly, in parallel to the question under the contract as to what profits were they expected to earn from 2014 to 2038 and then to 2058 for the private hospital. And that's why we make the point that it's easier to enter these contracts than it is to exit them. And that is what we're living through in real time.
Sounds complex.
Giles Edwards, resident and unfortunately frequent flyer to Northern Beaches Hospital, for which I give both praise and blame in equal measure. A preliminary point, it's a pity that a lot of the clarity is not here tonight because we don't have a representative from Healthscope on the dais there. That would help Mr Mookie invariably with some of his inability to speak for Healthscope or anybody else. Were they invited, or is there a representative of Healthscope here to put their side of the story, whatever that might be, just as a preliminary matter.
No, I didn't invite them. Jackie?
Right. Okay, well, it would give greater clarity to some of their point of view, perhaps. But my real point is the public hospital system, again, I've been to, sadly, a number of them. Most of it's been very good and very praiseworthy. But we've also had, anyone over the decades has heard some horror stories from Bankstown Hospital, Wee Waa Hospital, Westmead Hospital, Campbelltown Hospital. They're not immune from the sort of things we've seen at Northern Beaches outcomes. How can we guarantee that whatever the funding and all the toiling and moiling that Daniel Mookie's been telling us, thank you, how can we guarantee that public ownership in itself will be any better than the current system at Northern Beaches? And you know the expression, be careful what you wish for, it could possibly even be a little bit worse, depending on the specific improvements that a government may or may not make to the current deficiencies in Northern Beaches.
Well, I'll defend vigorously the New South Wales public health system, and I did it in opposition and I'll do it again now. If you're going to be sick anywhere in the world, you want to be sick in New South Wales. And I want to be clear on this, is that this is the only model of PPP or private arrangement where they are running an acute public emergency department. I want to be clear that Daniel and I are not opposed to private hospitals. They play an important role for Anthony and other local health districts to be able to get additional elective surgery and people through elective surgery lists. They play an important role. No one's making that judgment from the government. What we are saying, and this is the only one of its type, we do not believe this model, which is about acute public care, particularly through an emergency department, is best run through a private model. That's not one we support, and we are very confident, given the history and extensive history that New South Wales Health has of operating emergency departments, that we can do it better. But I'm also not going to pretend that things don't happen in New South Wales hospitals and emergency departments every day. They're not perfect. But I will defend every day of the week the incredible work that the women and men do every single day right across the hospital system to keep our community safe on their worst day.
Thank you. My name's Andrew Gill. We lost our beautiful little man, Josh Gill, in August of 2021. All these matters were put on the record about a year later, and we are still here. Treasurer, you said in your preface to your remarks that we are at a crisis level or a crisis point with the Northern Beaches Hospital. Health Minister Park, you said that it is a failed model and the public sector does best. It puts patients before profits. We now have in the Northern Beaches the paradox of this. Our local, privately owned public hospital that does not make money to provide service to public people is now run by creditors. Now, if that's not a crisis and an emergency, I do not know what is. Minister Park, in my view, is the most powerful person in our democratic system. As a health minister, under the Health Administration Act, you have emergency powers and you used those during COVID. We have an emergency. If you are really fair dinkum, tonight you could issue a notice and put the control of the Northern Beaches Hospital, the public portion, back in public hands. I do not understand why both of you there, and with the greatest respect, and I do respect you for coming out, and it would be difficult, and losing children to this is just awful. You are conflating getting out of a bad deal and what that will cost people versus lives that got us into this mess. You have powers as a state government to acquire property. You do it all the time to build a road. Acquire the contract back and sort people out. They are two different issues. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. My kids certainly don't think I'm a powerful person, but thank you. Can I say, on behalf of the government, how very sorry we are for your loss. Being the health minister is tough. It doesn't make anything in terms of the pain and suffering that you've gone through, and I want to be very clear about that, both as the health minister but as a dad. So that is important to me that you hear that. Let me assure you that we are working as vigorously and as hard and as fast as we can to pull this thing back in. I want to make sure no one understands, no one leaves here that with any thought that the Treasurer and I are going in any way slow on this. The original plan in the contract was to actually take around 3 years for the transition to take place. Our officials are literally working 7 days a week on trying to make sure that we extract this as quickly as possible. We do have a contract, okay, and we are managing taxpayers' money. It's not Daniel's money, it's not mine, it's the community's. So we have a...
Andrew, we hear you. No, don't be sorry. We hear you. I think it's fair and reasonable that the Minister respond because he's very sincere and genuine that and is proven tonight.
Yeah, I can assure you that we wish we weren't in this position, sir. I wish former governments didn't make this decision. The reality is that we were elected and we're accountable. And it's our decision and it's our determination to fix it. That's what people elect governments to do every 4 years. And you don't get to talk about the past without saying you've got to fix the future. And we've got to fix the future. I can assure you that I've worked with the Treasurer for a very long period of time. And I've never seen him more determined to get this issue resolved. And I can give you a guarantee that we are working around the clock and we will get it resolved.
Thank you. Ishbel.
Thank you. My name's Ray Atkinson. My brother is Dustin. My sister-in-law is Leah. And my niece is baby Harper. Firstly, I'd like to thank you all for coming out today and sort of echo everyone's statements. Appreciate it's not easy. That's you yourself, Ryan, Daniel, and also Kelly as well. Thank you for coming out today. Ryan, also thank you for the time you gave us last week at Parliament House, as well as Jackie and Michael as well. You know, it was really important for Leah and I to have that conversation with you and feel heard in that moment as well. So thank you very much. You know, we've heard tonight that how complex this contract is and how hard, you know, you and the team are working to try and bring this back into public hands. So we appreciate that this could take some time, whether it be weeks, whether it be months. It sounds like there's a lot of work ahead. So something that Leah sort of raised when we were in Parliament last week that we'd, you know, like to get a understanding of again here, and so the rest of the community can understand as well, is, you know, what interim measures can be put in place while this process proceeds to ensure that people can feel safe to go up to Northern Beaches Hospital. One of those things is a 24/7 theatre team, one of the key reasons why baby Harper's not here today. And another one of those things is increasing funding right now to ensure that there is safe staffing levels at Northern Beaches Hospital. Those are two things that can be done today. Beyond that, I know the conversations that we had, Ryan, about the 24/7 theatre team, and I understand that, you know, at this point, Northern Beaches Hospital is classified as a level 5 hospital, whereas Royal North Shore, for example, is classified as a level 6, meaning that, you know, Northern Beaches Hospital, under that classification system, wouldn't necessarily receive a 24/7 theatre team. Is it the position of the current government that moving forward, if this hospital was to come back into public hands, that we can increase that level classification, ensuring that Northern Beaches is a level 6, recognising that, you know, Northern Beaches Hospital is in a unique geographic position. It services nearly 300,000 people on the Northern Beaches. On a bad day, it can take 1 to 2 hours to get from Northern Beaches Hospital to Royal North Shore, and that's too long. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Roy.
Thank you again for your time last week. Your loss is incomprehensible, and I appreciate the frankness of that discussion. In relation to the operating theatres, I think I said last week, and I'll say again to this group, we will certainly look at that if we were to take the hospital over. That would certainly be a factor. What I would need to do and what people need to understand is that we don't have 24/7 at every hospital across New South Wales. Even large hospitals don't necessarily have 24/7. We need throughput through those to ensure that our clinicians and specialist staff are dealing with enough patients to maintain skills. Now, the operating theatres is one issue, as is the nurses' issue. That would be high on priority in terms of the operational component that Anthony and his team will be looking at if we were to take that hospital over. I can't give you a guarantee tonight because I don't like giving people false hope, to be brutally honest. I can give you a guarantee that we will look at that issue. I can give you a guarantee that we would want to move very quickly to nurse-to-patient ratios. At the moment, those hospital staff are not employed by New South Wales Health, so I think that's important to acknowledge and understand. But very quickly, we are moving from the contractual phase that Daniel and his team are largely working on with Health and Treasury to what will be the operationalisation of what that will look like, which will be led by Anthony and Matthew Daly and the team at New South Wales Health.
Can I just supplement the answer and also just acknowledge your loss? I'm very sorry for it. You asked about funding. I should say we have been providing top-up funding above the contract. And I should also acknowledge the previous government was too. And we are providing additional money in, and we negotiate that basically every month to ensure that the funding is there to meet the critical standards. That is what was reported yesterday with the Auditor General's report. But I just want to be sure you and he, I'm not sitting here as a Treasurer or from the Treasury expecting to pay less. We know that we will be investing more. In large part, that's because it's becoming a public hospital if we take it over. And so that's my expectation as well. But you're right to say in the interim, what can we provide people assurance with about the interim levels? Yeah, we are providing extra funding through the systems. That's worked through with HealthScope. It's not easy. I'm not going to speak for the people who are doing those negotiations basically every week, every month. It's constantly reviewed. The people who are here. But we are very clear when we say patient safety isn't just something we're saying in abstract. We are putting extra money in.
It's nearly 8:30, so I'm going to wrap up with a few more questions. Susie?
Good evening, Mr. Ministers. I'm Professor Richard West. I've been a surgeon for 40 years at the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital. I know the system in and out. Mr. Minister, you need to be congratulated on the service throughout New South Wales. It is an excellent health service, one of the best health services in the world. However, the Northern Beaches is not getting what it deserved. And this has been confirmed by the Auditor General's report, which was very, very scathing. It doesn't just say the public system, it says their services are not being provided for anybody. And it doesn't just say public, it's obviously for private patients as well. I was very concerned as a clinician about what they mentioned about the clinical services, particularly about the mental health services for children and adolescents. and your department, Mr Minister, failed to negotiate 4 beds at the Northern Beaches Hospital for 36. Suicide is one of the major problems in the Northern Beaches. Also, at the other end of the scale, it's the stroke unit. We've been trying to get a fully functioning stroke unit at the Northern Beaches Hospital since it's opened. It is not a full unit. It cannot give clot-busting treatment to patients. They're put in an ambulance and sent to North Shore. I was surprised to read in the report this was a decision of the local health service, sir, who said it was more economical to do it at North Shore, and the doctors at North Shore would lead their expertise. I could not believe that. You know, having a stroke, the quicker the better you get the clot-busting treatment. You should be in casualty seen immediately, taken straight in to the hospital, put in the CAT scanner. It's there, not put in an ambulance for an hour while you're stroking off. This is not acceptable.
Thank you,
Mr
Richard.
Minister, you need to look at this and revise it as soon as possible.
Thank you, Richard. And I'll just jump in on one of your questions.
As far as taking over the hospital goes,
Thank you, Richard.
as far as taking over the hospital, you have to take over the whole hospital.
They've heard that loud and
In
clear.
my experience, it will not work.
They've heard that loud and clear, Richard.
Thank you.
And I just want to add that Dr. Sophie and Zali, myself, in particular, were pushing very hard the Minister for Mental Health, Rose Jackson, about spending the money. James Griffin, local member for Manly, was also a part of that, and we've been pushing and we're meeting weekly, monthly with the Minister about getting those beds into Northern Beaches Hospital, but it was next to impossible, as we learnt, and we've had some other advancements forward. But I'll let the Minister answer whatever he'd like to respond, or let it go, but we've got other questions over here.
Thank you.
Where am I looking?
No, Ishmael?
Hi, my name is Patrick Coleman. I'm a nephrologist and general physician at Northern Beaches Hospital, but more importantly, I'm a member of the local community. And I'm also Secretary of the Medical Staff Council. If New South Wales Health takes over the public side of the hospital, I have 2 questions. The first question is, can we have an undertaking that should you take over the hospital, that we will, as a community, have fully resourced beds in exceeding the number of beds that we had at Manny and Mona Vale combined? That's the first question. And the second question I have to ask is, if you take over the hospital, can you provide Keith and I, as members of the Medical Staff Council, that you will involve us in decision making? Because I can tell you now that for the past 11 years, my involvement in the whole process has been in vain. Most of the problems that have occurred since 2014, we predicted and we were ignored. I can tell you that now. And so, we're not... I'm sorry. So the first question was, will we have as many public beds as we had at Manly and Mona Vale combined? Because now the community is larger. It would be unacceptable that the number of beds would be reduced. And this is crucial, because the hospital has been built in such a way that it is a scrambled egg. And unscrambling that egg is going to be extremely difficult. And so unscrambling the egg in such a way that you have as many public beds as we've had before is going to be tricky. The second question is, can we please be involved? Can the senior clinicians with decades of experience of working in hospitals please be involved in decision making, given the fact that most of the problems that have occurred were predicted by us, but we were ignored?
Minister. And we'll have time for one more. I think that gentleman had his hand up, so one more.
Sorry. Thank you. On your second point, I'll just deal with that first. I'm happy to give you a commitment tonight that Anthony and I will meet with you over the next couple of weeks to start that engagement. I think that is important, even before we've made a decision around how this is going to work. So I've had an opportunity to speak to other parts of the health workforce, and I'm more than happy to set up a discussion with the Medical Staff Council on site. That's not a problem. Secondly, in relation to beds, obviously we want to maximise the number. But unscrambling a facility that is in one facility, 2 hospitals running, is not easy, sir. And I'm not going to pretend that it is. I'm just not. It is very different to other hospitals, such as the private at North Shore, the private at St Vincent's. They are on separate locations, essentially, and their shared services are not integrated in the same way in which these are. So, yes, I'm happy to engage with the staff, and that's both the medical staff and the nursing staff and the allied healthcare staff. That's not a problem. And we will always do our best to maximise the number of public beds. Of course, that will be the focus. But I'm also not going to pretend that unscrambling that is going to be an easy thing either. I'm just not.
Okay, we're going to have one. This gentleman with his hand up has been up for a while. You've got a gentleman sitting kneeling down, and we've got one down the front who's we need to respect. So this is it. 3. That's it. We're done.
Short and fast.
Short and fast.
Ministers, thank you for coming. With the greatest respect, though, you're tiptoeing around the elephant in the room very delicately. If I sign a contract, I'm expected to deliver. If I don't deliver, I get sacked. Healthscope has clearly not delivered. And the families here are testament to that. And yet you are tiptoeing around this, recoiling. Oh, it's too difficult, it's too hard, it's too complex. You're not doing a very good job. You could sack these people overnight with legislation to do it. You haven't done it. You're tinkering with the edges. Just get in there and do your job. Kick them out. And if they don't like it, they can sue.
It ain't that simple. I don't know if you want to respond or... I mean, you've heard how it's not that simple. Otherwise, we would have done it for the bus contracts as well. Let's be honest. If it was that simple, it would have been done. And I think we've heard about that. We've heard the complexities. And that we'd be the first to be sued. We're doing what we can to make sure there's no compensation paid as well, hence the bill that was moved. I don't know if you want to add anything else, Ministers or Treasurer, but I think everyone's doing as much as they can, including the opposition, so I think it's a positive. We had one down the front and then one at the end. So the HSU, I think it was, and then the gentleman to finish at the end. No. It was the HSU.
Hi, my name's Cheryl. I'm a delegate for HSU. And I've worked at the hospital since it started and many years before that in health. I just want to know when the timeline and how long the government is to continue for workers and patients to be at risk.
The timeline?
Yes.
To get it resolved. Look, the truthful answer is it's inherently uncertain. We are working to get it resolved as quickly as possible. There are 3 big milestones that are coming up. The first was actually on Monday, which was the question as to whether or not what was going to happen with the control of the Brookfield. The next question that will be coming up is 12 days, 26th of May, in which we will, at that point, get more clarity about who's actually in charge of Healthscope. And at that point, the banks are going to need to make a decision as to whether or not they're going to enforce their loans. And I know lots of people are talking about them being insolvent, and I know that term is used tonight colloquially, but legally they're not insolvent. We find out on the 26th of May. From our perspective, equally, there are some important debates that are coming in Parliament at the same time. And the truth is, when Parliament reaches its deliberations on Joe's Law and on Mr Egan's bill, we'll have more certainty about the timeline going forward.
Any one more question, and that's it, because we are way over time, and there's lots. We can keep talking all night, sadly. And I mean
Thanks,
that in a
everyone.
nice way.
There are no enemies in this room. We're all here because we really care about our hospital. I live in Forestville, 4 minutes from the hospital, and I want me and my family to be safe when we go there. The good news for me is I am the emergency physician responsible for resuscitation at Northern Beaches Hospital. And while we are all sick to our stomach about our failings with little Joe's case, the fact is we run a world-class resuscitation facility. And I'm only saying this because I don't want people to go away from this meeting and have nightmares tonight. We are dedicated to looking after you. My colleagues at Mona Vale and Manly years ago used to phone each other in tears because of patients we lost, whom we knew how to save, but we did not have the facilities to do so. With Cath Lab, interventional radiology, the specialists we have, we've got piles and piles of thank you letters from the patients that we have saved that would have died if we didn't have this hospital. I also don't care who runs it, but I promise you, when we opened, it was a debacle, because as Dr. Coleman says, nobody listened to what we said we needed. Half the staff left, which means the staff that remained are the staff that were problem solvers who were dedicated to solving things as best they could. We are understaffed compared with all the other hospitals in northern Sydney. Last time it was counted, we received more ambulances than North Shore Emergency Department, yet we have half their doctors and nurses. And yet we keep coming back. We come back, we get spat on, we get our tyres slashed, and we get called baby killers. But we keep coming back for you and for our own families. Trust us, we put you first. In the last 6 months, I've been invited to 3 different countries within Asia and Europe to talk about the development of resuscitation systems, because it's recognised that ours at Northern Beaches are world-renowned. We have a world-class resuscitation room with dedicated staff. Please don't lose sleep tonight.
Well said. Okay. Gentlemen, I'll just ask very quickly if you want to have any closing remarks before I then wrap up the night and say thank you to everyone here, because we could honestly go all night because there are that many questions, but we're here. Any closing remarks?
Yeah, I mean, I have, look, thank you is the obvious one. And we, as I said at the outset, we asked for the meeting because we wanted to be transparent, candid, and as open as we can, and to hear what people have to say, particularly because we're making major decisions. So from our perspective, we're very grateful as well for the opportunity to speak to you all tonight. There is one question that Jackie's pushing me to just provide a bit more further detail on, which I might do now, if that's okay.
That's unlike Jackie.
That is the question as to whether or not there's been any technical breach of the contract, which I think is the point that's been made. The advice we've received is that the contract that we have means that no is the short answer. And none of the standards or behaviour that Healthscope has engaged in or has been reported technically constitutes the breach of the contract. It's for you to judge the quality of the contract.
Ryan?
No, just to reiterate what the Treasurer said, to thank Michael, Jackie and my parliamentary colleagues. I want to reiterate a little bit what that last gentleman said from the emergency department. I have had an opportunity to speak with staff at that hospital, and I feel for them at the moment. They're dealing with a really difficult issue, as is the community. As is the community. I just ask that as you interact with those men and women in the hospital, that you do so in a respectful way as well, because they're doing their very best. This is not probably a model that they would have asked for. Clearly there are challenges. We are going to continue to engage deeply and widely with the workforce. I've got that message loud and clear tonight, and that's a commitment that I give to the workforce. But we'll also engage through your local representatives with you. We will be very, very transparent about what is happening. We made a commitment to the Massa family and others that we will keep them informed in a transparent way as best we can over the coming days and weeks ahead. It's a commitment that is important to Daniel and I, and we will do that to the broader Northern Beaches community through your representatives. But thanks for having us here tonight.
Thank you, Minister. And that, on that note, and Jackie, did you wish to add anything?
Just to say thank you, to remind everyone that the parliamentary inquiry is still taking submissions, and that is an important process, whether it's an opinion or you've had an experience. And also, if people didn't get their questions answered tonight, you know, Michael and I are more than happy to ask questions in question time or questions on notice. And as Minister Park said, continue to advocate for you. So,
thank you, Jackie, and thank you everyone here tonight. It's a big deal. We could go on for hours. But it's important that we get this on the table. The transparency is what we wanted. Answer your questions directly from the ministers. It is difficult, it's tricky. The model has created this. It's been very clear, and our last speaker summed it up, the stress that the staff are under, but thank God for them. And we've got your back, and we're doing everything we can to make sure we bring it back into public hands. So thank you for what you do, and let's make this happen. And thank you to our speakers tonight, all of you.